give us maybe just a moment for people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. We just have a few housekeeping stuff to go over as people continue to trickle in. So thank you for joining us today for the WaterSense and AWE Outdoor Water Efficiency webinar series. Again, like I said, a little bit of housekeeping. All of the attendees were muted when they entered the webinar, just to minimize background noise. To ask questions, you can definitely type those into the question box located in your control bar at the bottom of your screen. We will have a time to answer these questions at the end of the webinar, and if you have a more extensive question, you can always type in the question box that you have a long question, and we can go ahead and unmute you, but we'll still stick to all those questions at the end of the webinar. And finally, a recording of this presentation will be available on the WaterSense website and AWE's YouTube channel following this presentation. And before we get started, we would like to hear from all of you and take a few polls. So our first one, who we have here today, we'd like to know who you represent and where you come from. All right. And then I forgot, we get to review the results in live time. How exciting. It looks like we have quite a few from local and state governments, irrigation professionals, and then water utilities. Sweet. Thank you again for joining us today. And then we have another poll, which is, where are you? Yeah, we like to know who tunes in. Right. Right. It looks like most of us are from the West or the Southwest, which is pretty strong theme for our webinars. But again, thank you for joining us wherever you are. We definitely try to make these applicable to all regions in the United States, but it is helpful to know who logs on the most. All right. So again, thank you for joining today. Our webinar topic is irrigation after landscape conversions. Landscape conversions are an excellent tool to reduce water use outdoors. But simply removing turf or planting an adaptive plant in the landscape is not necessarily enough to maximize the benefits from a landscape conversion. Most landscapes require some degree of supplemental watering, at least during establishment periods or periods of drought, to remain healthy and vibrant. And it's important to use the right irrigation tools after conversion to maintain that investment in the new landscape. And then, of course, we want it to also save water. So today we have the Southern Nevada Water Authority as they highlight trends in outdoor water use after landscape conversions and the irrigation tools that they implement to realize, those additional water savings. And our speakers today are me. I'm Sarah Lavoie with EPA's WaterSense program. We have Lisa Hans with the Alliance for Water Efficiency, and then Kent Sobokol and Sean Answorth with the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Again, Sarah Lavoie is me. I'm an environmental protection specialist for the WaterSense outdoor program. I work with the technical team on new outdoor specifications, and I coordinate with professional certifying organizations to help to develop resources to promote water efficient practices with the industry and the public. I have 2 master's degrees, one in public affairs and one in environmental science. Both focus on water resource management from Indiana University. And then I also have a bachelor's of science from the Ohio State University. Dr. Liesl Hans is the director of programs at the Alliance for Water Efficiency, conducting industry research, facilitating collaboration, and fostering partnerships. She previously led the water conservation and water resource teams at Fort Collins Utilities, and she has a PhD in economics from Colorado State University and was on the City of Fort Collins Water Commission. Kent has a bachelor's of science from the University of Montana at Missoula and a master's of arts in science from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He is a certified conservation practitioner and certified landscape irrigation auditor. For the past 24 years, Kent has worked as an analyst and a supervisory role, worked in an analyst and supervisory roles supporting the Southern Nevada Water Authority and conservation divisions with an emphasis on outdoor water uses, irrigation, and cooling systems, and he helps develop codes, standards, and specifications. And then finally, we also have Sean, and Sean is an assistant conservation programs coordinator with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, primarily focusing on single-family residential communities. He has a BA in environmental science with an area of specialization in resource management. Sean has been employed with the Southern Nevada Water Authority for 26 years and is a native of Las Vegas. He is a certified conservation practitioner and a certified landscape irrigation auditor. And thank you all for joining us, to our speakers. All right, and today I just want to take the time to give you a few updates on WaterSense. Next month will include our Fix a Leak Week campaign, where we encourage everyone to take advantage of that spring cleaning bug to check their homes for common household leaks. Spring also means that it's time for a sprinkler spruce up. So before using your irrigation system this season, make sure that you check your system for any damage from frost or freezing and make repairs where needed. I know it's still February, but I think March and April are going to be here before we know it. So I want to plant those seeds. And especially if you're a local government or a water utility or any partner, I highly encourage you to participate in both of those campaigns. And you can find checklists for both Fix a Leak Week and Sprinkler Spruce Up on our website at epa.gov/watersense. All right, and then with our topic, just start off with some fun facts, which many of you might know, but just in case, the Earth is about 70% of water, and unfortunately, only about 1% of that water is available for human use and consumption. So water, contrary to how we sometimes treat it or picture it, is a finite resource. WaterSense strives to make it easy to single out water efficient products and to educate on best practices to save water. And saving water can ultimately help lower your water and energy bills, all while securing your local source of water now and for future generations. Because again, those resources are finite and we have to treat them as such. And currently in the outdoor sector, as much as 50% of water used is lost. These losses can be attributed to a lack of efficiency caused by poor irrigation system design. It could be due to improper system installation, a lack of maintenance, or improper scheduling. So to mitigate this, you can save water by purchasing WaterSense labeled products, making conscious plant choices in the landscape, hiring irrigation professionals, performing routine maintenance, and then of course, programming an appropriate irrigation schedule for both your climate and your landscape. And at WaterSense, we really like to stress viewing our landscapes as a usable space with some intended purpose or use. And often, after we envision this use, we want to do a landscape transformation. So today we're going to take a closer look at how to properly irrigate those plants after we do that landscape transformation, whether that's, planting pollinators because we want to see more, or plants that attract pollinators because we want to see more, butterflies or birds, or maybe, you install a patio and you want to entertain more in your space. Whatever the intended use is, after that landscape transformation, we want to ensure the longevity of the plants that you've installed. We want to make sure that that space is enjoyed for that intended use. And then, of course, we want to ultimately also limit the amount of water waste. And with that, I will pass it off to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Lisa Hans here with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. AWE is a stakeholder-based organization, really are working to advance a sustainable water future through water efficiency and conservation. And we do a variety of things with our members and other partners. You see a little bit more here, but if you want to learn more, feel free to visit our website. Next slide, please. So a few of AWE's resources that are currently available related to this topic. We've done a variety of work in this space. Before the pandemic, we did a bunch of work on sustainable landscape programs related to largely residential scale, so single family homes, what those landscape transformation programs look like, water savings from them, what differences in drivers and barriers to adoption and all of that. So there's a slew of resources available related to that area of work that AWE undertook. And then we also looked at what to do during drought. So oftentimes irrigation and outdoor water uses are targeted during drought restrictions. And so we did a big research study looking at how effective those are and different ways to use them. No surprises there, but largely mandatory restrictions are more effective than voluntary restrictions, and having more robust communication plans, of course, help in that space. So lots of great content in there. And then we've done a variety of other things. And for example, here, this Learning Landscapes grant program where we worked with a variety of community-based organizations across the United States to give them small grants to implement water-wise landscapes or transform a public space to a place where kids or the public or both can learn about different ways to make better use of the landscapes, whether it's for a community garden or capturing rainwater so you can eliminate having to use drinking water for irrigation. So all sorts of great examples and stories through that project. Next slide, please. So you've probably heard a lot about non-functional turf, especially if you're on this call today. So here's a few clips from the news just lately, but there's been a variety of cities who signed on to really commit to helping use water conservation as a key strategy to help with the Colorado River Basin's shortage. And beyond that, there's many other communities and agencies and states that are taking action to really make progress in this space. So it's looking like a lot of different things across the Colorado River Basin. It might be looking like things happening at the state level legislation. It might be looking like things that are happening at the local level, variety from incentives, more of the carrot side of things, all the way to bans and different regulations that are more on the stick sides of things. So seeing a lot of action happening. So this is a work in progress and folks are really in the weeds of this. Next slide, please. And so since this is top of mind for so many of our members in the industry, it's of course top of mind for us at Alliance for Water Efficiency. And so what we recognize that in this space of this non-functional turf, non-essential turf, whatever you want to call it, there's not great comprehensive research about what the potential for water savings is from these really larger scale landscape and irrigation strategies. We imagine that water savings might be different because these landscapes are quite different and can be different, but how much? So we know that these landscapes often have different functions in terms of serving many different people in a community rather than just your own front yard and backyard. There's lots of different stakeholders involved, usually multiple different layers of decision making, as well as a variety of folks that are involved in the actual design implementation, and then, as we'll talk about today, ongoing maintenance and irrigation of those properties. So there's a lot of different things that are very different about this compared to kind of your residential scale programs. Next slide, please. So AWE has undertaken a project which we're currently in the midst of. This continues on from this outdoor water savings research initiative, which included both that residential scale study as well as the drought effectiveness report. And so we're looking at what's happening on these larger scale landscapes. And really what we mean by larger scale is kind of your CII, so commercial, industrial, institutional, as well as the more kind of communal properties that might exist within a multifamily setting or an HOA kind of common space setting. So understanding both what's going on in terms of landscape transformation programs, as well as the programs that are designed to help customers optimize their irrigation. So, and we're finding more and more that this is really kind of the first step for folks, and then eventually they get into this landscape transformation space. So really exciting work happening here. And I think next slide is maybe the project participants. You'll go to the next slide. Oh no, these are the research questions. So I won't read all these for you, but really we're looking at a variety of different things, including how these programs are being designed and implemented, as well as we want to look at water savings and different outcomes. Maybe if we can get into it, what drives differences across the effectiveness of different programs. We want to learn more about multiple benefits. So how are we encouraging or requiring that these landscapes be transformed or managed in a way that achieves additional benefits like mitigating urban heat, helping improve pollinator or native plant coverage, and then really understanding what does it take to do this, both in terms of the resources, staff, financial expenditures, and then policies. What else is happening in terms of the policy side to really support or enhance these programs? Next slide, please. So there's a lot of folks working on this, and we have an amazing set of project partners and participants in this effort. And so you can see them all here, but we're really able to capture a variety of perspectives and different types of programs and different approaches across these many project participants. So we're really grateful that they're all involved and contributing what they know, what they're learning, because everybody's really in the midst of this and changing things as we go. So it's very exciting, and we'll be very pleased to share all the results with you all when they're ready. But I'll give you, I think, a few nuggets here on the next slide. So to date, we have a variety of participation data. So far, we've collected over 700 project sites across 11 of those participating utilities. We've also hosted a bunch of deep dive interviews with all of our project participants to better understand really what's going on in the nuances with their particular program and their setting and their community. Then we're also connecting with a variety of industry stakeholders to hear from folks beyond our utility participants. Next slide, please. And a few themes are, we're seeing an increase in funding and incentives across the board. So whether or not folks are sort of increasing their bucket of money overall, and or they're increasing kind of the dollar per square foot or the amount of rebate per device, all of these sorts of things. People are finding additional funding through grants. There's a lot going on in this space, but the key story takeaway there is that there is more money out there. We're seeing quite a range in terms of what's being implemented in terms of carrots versus sticks. It's really different across different organizations and communities, but generally seeing that more are adding some element of regulation or requirement to their efforts. There's quite a variety in terms of relationships with contractors, but really most highlight that this is an important area and an important community to work with and partner with to be successful in your community. We have found also that, especially for this particular program, we're finding most teams have really specialized skills amongst their staff. So irrigation, auditing, as you know, we know the folks on the call today for Southern Nevada have these skill sets, or backgrounds in horticulture, all sorts of stuff, but really technical and specific skills so that they can help their customers and implement these programs. And in terms of the multiple benefits, trees and shade are really rising to the top as the most important topic in that space. The next slide, I think, is my last slide, but thank you. If you want to learn more about this project or get involved, or you have a resource or experience to contribute, feel free to reach out to me. My email's right there. Otherwise, if you just want to stay connected with AWE and be the first to know when some of these resources are available when the project completes, You can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn. But thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to hearing from Southern Nevada, who's one of our project participants. So thank you.
Hello all, so I'm Kent Savicle. I've been an analyst with the Southern Nevada Water Authority for 24 years. Most of that time, my emphasis has been in providing research on existing and potential conservation programs. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to maximize water savings and landscape conversion from turf to water efficient landscaping. This will be a two-part talk with me speaking to the research findings that I think are valuable to this topic, and then my colleague Sean Ainsworth will be speaking more to the on-the-ground practicalities working with the trip systems and scheduling that makes the system a success. Next slide. So just quickly to explain what is Southern Nevada Water Authority. We're the water wholesaler for the region in Southern Nevada, mostly located within Clark County. You can see there are member agencies. Those are the purveyors to the actual end users. The unique thing about our water resource dynamic, other than the fact that we're relatively limited in the amount of water available in totality, is that nearly 100% of our return flow credit, nearly 100% of our water reaching the sanitary sewer, we can get back as return flow credit, meaning that we practically have, well, theoretically, an almost unlimited amount of water from indoor use, but anywhere it's used outdoors that doesn't make it to the sanitary sewer, even if it makes it to the storm sewer, we don't get back that credit for. So for that reason, outdoor use is certainly of high importance to us, in addition to the area we're in inherently. Outdoor use would be of great interest, I think, to any utility. Next slide. A lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today, I want you to know, is drawn from research from a study called the Xeriscape Conversion Study that we started in the late 1990s. And in this study, we of course recruited candidates for participation either as Xeric study group participants or turf study group participants. And then we averaged the reduction in use for the Xeric study group. And those things were fairly typical of other studies around the time as part of the National Xeriscape Demonstration Project, I would say. Where we're unique is we actually went in and sub-metered discrete portions of the landscape. So you can see in this drawing here, you can see the Xeriscape monitored study area. And then there's typically other Xeriscape areas that weren't monitored or other turf areas that weren't monitored. But by having one or more stations monitored via the sub-meter, then we could get that true per unit area application and basically cut through some of the concerns about interference in terms of the research, in terms of our ability to see what the savings would be. Before I get into those sub-meters, though, we will be looking at main meter data. I also just want to bring up, remember, the concepts we are talking about here are mostly universal, but some aren't. And of course, this is a study that's in the Southwest United States. So that is, it has irrigated turf and even irrigated water efficient landscaping plants. So while I think most things are applicable to your area, at least in part, obviously I'll try to note where that isn't necessarily the case. Next slide. So first, the main meter savings. Again, you can see there's a 30% drop, and we know that's now pretty typical for single family homes doing what are average size landscape transformations, regardless of where you are, really. I mean, for the most part, if you're converting a significant fraction of the front yard, which is the classic type of conversion, you're going to be getting around that figure on average. There has been quite a bit of speculation, I'll say, about the period of time following the conversion. And some people say that's when plants need more water for establishment. And then later on they save. There's others who say, well, xeric plantings may save water to begin with, but growth of the vegetation will inherently reduce the savings over time. I'd have to say our research, I don't know that we had the resolution to really go into too much on the pre-conversion versus the next few months, I'd say. In general, our research doesn't conform to either of those theories. You see, we see the 30% reduction, then generally it holds pretty flat. There is some evidence going out many years further that you do see a drop, and there is some suggestion of that you can see starting at year 3 through year 5. But at this time, we haven't done the research necessary to look at how it is over really lengthy periods of time. Now let's look at the sub-meter data. Next slide. Okay, so what did we find from those submeters? We found that on average, people put out 73 gallons per square foot per year, or if you're an irrigation person, it's 117.2 inches. And you can see for the xeric areas, they put out 17.2 gallons or 27.6 inches. So a marked difference, as you would expect. That average savings, that average difference is 55.8 gallons per square foot. And that same value is also what you get if you look at pre-post conversions in the single family sector, and you mathematically work it out. So if you do a good job on measuring your areas, yeah, it also works out as 55.8 gallons per square foot when you get to about 30 participants or so. This is an example where obviously in a desert environment, this is going to be the most magnified, right? So your savings values may be somewhat smaller depending on where you are, though I think in general the same effect probably takes place. The only thing is, okay, so this is a robust savings measure. Xeriscape is a robust savings measure, but it doesn't really get into telling you how to maximize the savings really. So to do that, you have to dial in a little bit more. So we're going to take it to another level here and look at the distribution of savings. Distribution of use, excuse me, per unit area use. All right, this is the only graph I believe I'm going to show you today where gallons per square foot per year is along the x-axis. So note that. So that means the further to the right you go, the higher the water application per unit area. And then you see here the percent of sample in each category is along the y-axis. So give you first just a moment to get accustomed to that. And higher application to this side, lower application to this side. Not terribly surprisingly, the xeric landscapes dominate the left side, again, as you would expect. And you see turf dominates more the right, because that is also a relatively more of a normal distribution, whereas you see xeriscape just be really skewed to the left. Even turf to some extent is skewed to the left. I'll say relative to how some people do irrigate way out past this area here. While we know this is the general distribution, what we find is that there is a degree of overlap, isn't there? And you can see that between I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 70 or 80 gallons per square foot per year, there is some overlap. So we know some of that is due to people's failure to maintain a grass lawn versus tufts of live grass in an otherwise dead lawn. We know there are some other problems related to, there can be catastrophic failure, when you do a landscape conversion, if they forget to tie back the 3/4 inch tubing, which is sort of what is standard in this industry, even though they should be putting on an end cap, those things sometimes can cause a big leak, and you can compromise your savings that way. But I believe the bulk of this is just due to management. And so you can see there's a significant amount of pickup here. If we could get people, once they get to xeriscape, to be using a bit less and closer to the mean and median here. Before I leave this, I did just want to mention I had to cut this slide off on the right side, because there are people who still on the turf side managed to put tremendous volumes of water onto a landscape. Excuse me. One example was one of our participants, his name, I kid you not, was Larry Lake. He actually managed to put on 300 gallons per square foot per year, which is like 40 feet of irrigation equivalent. And then you had another person, I had another person who broke that record and put on 60 feet. And all I can say is that those volumes, you're not irrigating as much as you're engaging in aquifer recharge, in my opinion. Next slide. All right, and I'll go again, not necessarily a surprising result here, but again, a pronounced one. As you see in Southern Nevada, the gallons per square foot, here it is per month, not per year, of course. You can see it, of course, shows a very clear summer peak, as you would imagine for turf grass. Whereas for xeric, comparatively, you can see you only see this slight rise here. And of course, this illustrates one of the most striking things about the impacts of the conversion, which is it greatly impacts your summer peaking. So if you have issues with that, this is certainly a very, very good way to affect that. Again, though, as previously, and you'll see that sort of as a theme here, if if we just look at this, we aren't getting a lot on, okay, how do we maximize it? So we're going to go into that a little bit more as we delve into this more. Next slide. Okay, so here we're comparing, and you'll notice I switched the axis to inches because we're going to look at mean turf irrigation in green versus average ETO. Couple things, again, you see that in the first part of the year, starting with February, March, April, in the spring here, even May, they aren't too bad. You see they're relatively in line with ET, our irrigators. But you can see come summer, they really start to panic and they go way over. And then you see that they stay over ET all the way down. So I think what happens here is that going up the curve, their grass starts to look a little less green and they turn up the irrigation. And then as they get past that though, they don't see it being too green as being a problem. So, and I think you see this in a lot in the Southwest, especially. They just don't have that feedback until something happens, a storm, they go out and it's marshy, whatever, that gets them to get that signal and get back down to closer to ET. So I want you just to understand this pattern as we go and look to xeriscape. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so looking at xeric areas is much more challenging because there isn't necessarily a simple metric like ET to use. In practice, I've found though that if you see it about 0.33 fraction of ETO, so about 33%, it's a pretty good estimator of xeric plants with some trees. So, and looking at this way, you can see that certainly the xeric area application tends to run behind, if anything, what we would expect would be the need. But it's really slumped to the right, you can see, of the ET curve, which is to be expected. Woody plants take longer to show the impacts of droughting stress. So we expect that, but you will note they still have sort of the same problem, don't they? Come September, now they're well over ET, and they stay well over ET. In fact, the January point is, relatively speaking, in some ways they water in our area worse than their turf grass. So again, that same, I guess I'd say just understand that your messaging shouldn't just be targeted at turf grass. Certainly, in the latter part of the year, there's a good chance they're probably overwatering their xeric landscape as well. Next slide. All right, so what I did here was I just sort of distilled this down, and also this has some irrigation efficiency assumptions in it. But again, starting with turf, you can see again in March, April, but also I showed in February. Generally, they're not hugely over the reference. Their reference, of course, being ET, and then on September through January, though they are. Again, for xeric, recognizing there are some limitations in terms of figuring out what the reference should be. We see that they generally do well throughout the spring and into their summer, but in fall they also have problems. So again, keep this in mind as you're thinking about your messaging. I know we tend to focus on the peak, and again, converting people converting to xeriscape will greatly reduce the peak inherently. But that doesn't mean you should stop your messaging in terms of watering, because again, there's more savings to be had, especially in our area in the winter, essentially. In your area, it may be in the shoulder seasons. Next slide. All right. Well, I tend to think that irrigation scheduling is probably the biggest source of issues for trying to maximize water savings from xeriscape. There are some things that are also important that are could be potential levers that you should think about. This particular one is something where I'm not necessarily going to say I recommend it. It's one to understand, which is, do lusher xeriscapes use more water? Not surprisingly, the answer is yes. And you can see here, this is canopy coverage class versus mean annual consumption. Now, in general, I'll say that these things especially are best looked at using multiple regression, not what you're seeing here. However, multiple regression is really messy to talk about in a web talk, and this is more than sufficient for what we're trying to do. So yeah, certainly lusher xeriscape certainly drives up water use, as does almost certainly higher water use plants. So yeah, if you really want to put this up high, you know, have a multi-story canopy with palms, and yeah, you can imagine that could get up to being very high mean annual consumption. Most utilities have a 50% canopy coverage requirement, as do we, and not surprisingly, that's about where the mean is. Yeah, as you can kind of look here, consider 17.2 of you right in there. So I mentioned this because it's a possible lever if one was if it was needed. Our organization, I think most others are concerned about urban heat island though. And so if anything, we're pushing that there needs to be more trees in xeric landscape conversions, and we're even providing an additional rebate for that now. Yes, you could affect this by canopy coverage class, but there's likely to be a trade-off, I think, on urban heat island. Next slide. Now, as you saw, I mean, canopy coverage can really be strongly linked with what uses in the conversion, and as such can limit, you know, what savings you can get out of it as well. If you put in a really dense xeriscape, you can only get so much out of it, obviously, as you saw on the last slide. We see again that there is the relationship between station flow rate and mean annual consumption. This chart here is for xeric landscapes only, but it does hint at something larger, which I'll say we've spun off in other ways, which is this effect actually is probably universal across landscape types and can even be used as a proxy to what ultimate mean annual consumption will be in that landscape. I'll just have to say that's a different talk though. The reason we see this, of course, is because typically when the denser planting is put in there, you're putting in more emitters, right? So you have a higher station flow rate. Furthermore, in this study, we didn't have a drip restriction like you would typically see. So we actually had watering with all sorts of different manner of emission devices. I'm also going to mention this. You can see down here, about an extra 13,615 gallons per year was saved for uniformly drip. I mean here, uniformly drip stations. There is very much an advantage to having a uniformly drip station, because otherwise you're going to be in the difficult position of having to overwater some plants that have higher output emission devices to ensure this plants with the lowest emission devices get sufficient water. So yeah, just consider that. Again, hydrozoning is important, and this is I think a relatively rare case where it's actually quantified here. Next slide. And you can see here, these are just station flow rates by what type of emitter class. You can see again, true drip is certainly quite a bit lower. So you want to make sure you restrict people to truly drip systems. I will say in most cases, you know, you're not going to see it expressed in station flow rates. That's what people practically put in. But for example, our requirement is emitters rated at 20 gallons per hour or less. So you definitely want to make sure you have that restriction. Otherwise, you again will be limiting what you can do, and you'll not be maximizing the savings. So to finish up my part of this, next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, hey, look, we've got graphics coming in now. That's what they look like if you're curious. Okay. Landscape transformations, lessons from research. So in general, water efficient landscaping is relatively robust. I mean, it's quite a bit, it's a robustness in some ways approaches going from say our toilets to ultra low flow toilets, but there are certainly opportunities to maximize savings. First up is for any conversion, whether that's the homeowner or the representative from the utility doing a post-conversion site visit, you want to walk the zones, make sure there isn't something catastrophic, because that can triple your savings. Irrigation management is still so important here. Just because it's a water efficient landscape does not mean it's inherently at maximized and that there isn't more to be had. Make sure to look beyond the peak irrigation season at the shoulder or winter months. Lesser landscapes do use more water, but you need to balance that against UHI and also customer preferences. You want people to have some degree of ownership of it, and you want them to be able to be excited. And so instance, they may want more canopy in an area that's more visually obvious, like a front yard versus say on the side yard. So you got to consider all those things. And finally, it's important to have a water efficient landscape that fully embraces the concept of low flow irrigation and proper hydrozoning. And with that, I will turn over to Sean.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So when we talk about irrigation after landscape conversions, the key for the amount of savings is more than anything else is to start with a plan. So next slide. So really when it comes to is you want to put it on paper and be able to visualize what you want. By not having the ability to do that, that's where your conversion or a conversion can go simply haywire if you're not reviewing what the yard is that needs to be converted. So first off, when you're out doing a site assessment, especially look at the existing plants, will they fit in? So within your plan, you have to determine what kind of theme you would like within your yard. Do you want kind of a lush xeric landscape or more of a very low water use um, succulents, etc., or very low water use plant material? And would that existing tree or shrubs, would they would they reflect the kind of idea that you want within your yard? And then the grass as well. With the grass, if you were going to keep some grass within the front or backyard, within the conversion, what you need to look at is, especially if areas, if the landscape, or excuse me, the irrigation system, does it need to be replaced? If you're upgrading the landscape for the convert or the area that you're converting, will the turf area need to be or the irrigation need to be upgraded as well? And then finally, what you want to look at is, this is the time that you'd want to look at potentially upgrading your irrigation clock, any of the existing valves, especially how long the property or how long the landscape's been in that property that you're looking at, and then any of the piping. Generally speaking, most of the lands, when it comes to drip systems or the poly tubing pipe or PVC pipe, usually after 15 to 20 years, you're probably looking at a complete upgrade. Next slide. So really what we convey to our customers is, what do you want to do? What do you want? Are you looking for outdoor entertaining? Do you have children? Are you going to potentially add artificial turf, add an edible garden? What kind of shade you want, especially here in Southern Nevada? The sun gets rather intense during the summertime, so how much shade do you want around your backyard to be able to allow you to be able to go outside during the afternoon? What you want to look at as well, the shapes and the sizes of plants. Obviously, one thing, and I'll get into it in a couple more slides, but what you want to look at is, as Kent said, some people put a lot of dense planting, newly installed planting, and they make it very dense, but they're not considering the fact of what the size they will be down the road. So a lot of times customers or property owners will purchase uh, 50, 40, 50, 60 different 1 gallon plant material, but they don't consider the size that they'll reach at their maturity. So then what occurs is 2 to 3 years down the road, you got a jungle in your yard and you have to maybe remove some of that plant material because it's become quite intense in there. Also, what you look at is, again, the plant material that you want, the color, what survives in the climate of where you're located at. Watering requirements is one of the biggest keys, obviously. There may be some native plant material that may be able to survive with very little to no watering, or there may be plant material such as the mature plant material that you already have in your yard that still would need some existing watering or increased watering because the grass is being removed. Next is hydrozoning, which is one of the key components of being able to um, save with the conversion, and which I'll get into again in a second. And then finally, the sun exposure and the shade. Really, what we're getting at is the microclimates, where you want to plant, what type of plant material that will provide shade during the summer and allow the sun to peek through onto your home during the winter. Next slide. So again, as I said, this may be it's an aerial view of just a typical conversion property, but really what in this aspect, what you want to look at is, again, where does the size of the plants, how large they will get to be able to produce the amount of shade you have, especially as you could see where this property owner has some walkways, et cetera. What you want to look at is, again, the amount of shade that you be able to utilize those pathways and sitting areas that you have throughout your yard. And again, the amount of water that the plants that you install, are they moderate water use plant material? Are they high water use plant material? These things that you can look for, especially at your local cooperative extension, the water agency itself, or even the nursery. Again, other ideas is just your views. What do you want to look at? The type of plant material. Are they the trees that you install? Do you want the view? Do you have views of the mountains or an area that will the trees that you install? Will they take away that view that you're looking at, or is the view you don't want your neighbor to view into your yard? So what type of plant material or trees to be able to screen your backyard? And then finally, the sunny, shady areas, which I want to go on to the next slide. So as you can see here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is look at when a property owner is looking at their home, you really have to look at what we call the microclimate of the property. What kind of sun exposure is being received, because especially during the summer, you want to maybe look at deciduous trees, obviously that lose their leaves. So when it's summer, obviously you get full shade. It allows cooling effect on your property. And again, as you saw on the previous slide, lower the, potentially the cost of your power bill. But also during the winter time, you want to be able to allow that sun to go through, to be able to potentially use that sun's heat to be able to keep your house warm during the day. Also look at prevailing winds. Generally for Southern Nevada, we have our prevailing winds are from the north during the wintertime, and the south during the summertime. So what you want to look at is, again, any windscreen, any type of large shrubs, oleanders or Arizona woods, rosewood, things of that nature that may be able to be a natural wind break for your front and or backyard. And then finally, we'll get in the next slide, but what you want to do again, and again, this goes into, as Kent talked about, the savings which we've discovered through our xeriscape conversion study, is you want to plant plants within similar water needs. You don't want to have, generally speaking, you don't want to have mature trees with newly planted ground cover, or trees and potentially shrubs on the same zone as well. So what we call these are just this is an example for what we utilize in Southern Nevada is medium waste zone, transition zone, and an arid zone. Arid zone meaning low drought water, not necessarily cactus or succulents as some would think, but just drought tolerant plant material that that we consider that utilized in Southern Nevada. Next slide. So as you can see here, this is a perfect landscape plan that gives you an idea of what we have. So we have the arid zones, a small little grass area in the backyard. We have the, mini oasis zone, et cetera. But really what you want to look at is on the right-hand screen, you see what kind of irrigation we utilize for each of these zones. So as you can see, we have the different sorts of drip irrigation for these plant material. And again, they're grouped on the same, they're grouped together. So as you can see, we have the drip inline or drip tubing for the trees and shrubs. They're on their own zone. The inline drip tubing for the veggie garden, it's on its own zone. Obviously, the grass are on its own zone. So then the ease of water, you'll be able to schedule all the different waterings within your irrigation clock to make sure you apply the right amount of water to the right plant material that you have. And this is kind of the key in terms of savings. So you're not over or under watering plant material within your property. Next slide. So again, when we visit with the property owners, let me get this down a little bit. When we're dealing with the property owners, what we want to look at is, this is once the grass is removed, anytime you want to make any grade changes, mounds or stream beds, especially within our climate, we have a very compacted desert soil. It may be hard to dig in, so that's where an idea of where you may be able to haul in some soil to be able to allow some plantings on some mounds, etc. This is where you want to make any irrigation changes or irrigation additions, that's what I should say. So this is where, all right, am I going to use this type of drip tubing or these emitters, or am I using inline drip tubing, etc. Also, generally for a xeric conversion, as Kent spoke of earlier, we always want to utilize a drip irrigation system. Flood bubblers, spray heads, micro sprays, those, if you're looking at true savings for a conversion, you can't use those. But flood bubblers can use upwards of 15 to 20 gallons per minute for each, flood bubbler. Spray heads, obviously, we know can use, upwards of 3 to 5 gallons a minute. So you want to really look at a drip irrigation system for the conversion. Finally, this is where you want to add any the plantings that planting and soil amendments that you want, add the irrigation, and then finally mulch. In this case, in this conversion, it's a rock mulch. For our Southern Nevada, as Las Vegas, we consider any mulch anything that covers the native topsoil. So inorganic mulch would be rock, or in some cases we allow artificial turf for our conversions. We consider that a mulch. Pavers, anything that allows water to go through the soil, we call that inorganic mulch. And then organic mulch is what we tend to think of as mulch, bark mulch, etc. Next slide. So again, these are the examples for the drip system. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. It puts water where it needs, as spray heads do, just kind of waters in a certain area, but there's a lot of water loss due to evaporation or runoff. Again, it puts water exactly where you want, where you're watering for the plants. Application is usually in gallons per hour. Waters irregularly shaped areas efficiently, whereas again, as I said, spray heads, it waters either in a 360, a half, quarter heads, etc. adjust for problem soil. So again, for the emitters, if you have clay soils, you may want to have a lower flow drip system, whereas if you have loam or sandy soils, you may look at something with a higher emitter rate. Reduces pest and weed problems because again, it puts water where you want it. Whereas the emitter, you're watering exactly where the plant is. So as long as you're not running it over than it should, there should be reduced weed problems for the plant that you're watering or irrigating. And then finally, obviously, as we've discussed, is the water savings. Next slide. So we have the point source emitters. So the point source emitters are, as you can see, waters usually tend to recommend the point source emitters for small shrubs, trees. Their watering can be up to, they have anywhere from, the manufacturer produce anywhere from a half gallon an hour up to 20 gallons or even 25 gallons an hour. We tend to, as Kent said previously, for purposes of our conversion program, we do not allow any emitters that are above 20 gallons an hour. Generally, that reflects to the adjustable emitters. We tend to really recommend the pressure compensating emitters for homeowners, where at the beginning of the line, as an example, if you purchase a 2 gallon an hour emitter or purchase 2 gallon an hour pressure compensating emitters, it's going to put 2 gallon an hour at the beginning of the line. It's going to put exactly 2 gallons an hour at the end of the line. And that's what a pressure compensating emitter does. Whereas the adjustable emitters, they are not pressure compensating. So at the beginning of the line, it may put out, 18 gallons a minute. And then towards the end of the line, depending on how many emitters you add, it may put out 8 or 7 or 6. So usually it's the right place. Some instances for gardens, potted plants, you may want to use adjustable emitters, but for purposes of for entire landscape conversion, you want to go with the point source. Line source tubing, go back real quick. Sorry. The line source tubing, highly recommend utilizing those for mature trees. The manufacturers Rainbird or Netafim, highly, especially if you have mature trees that are going to be converted, highly recommend utilizing those because it can be able to mimic the irrigation that was surrounded with the grass. You want to be able to provide the right amount of water for those mature trees. And even in new trees, I highly recommend the inline, and you place the emitters out towards the canopy and allow those trees roots to be able to build towards the potential canopy of that tree. Next slide. Obviously, when it comes to, as I said, the grouping plants with similar water needs, this is where it goes into your irrigation clock. So as my previous plan stated, as an example, you want to be able to have a clock that be able to irrigate excuse me, real quick, those transition zones or those zones efficiently. So as I previously said, you have the mini oasis zone, you have your transition zone, we'll call that grass. And then in this case, we have the annual color. So what we'd have the trees and shrubs on one program. So it's watering its own schedule, the grass on its own schedule, and then the flowers on its own schedule. So then again, in the summertime, you may have, in this case of our climate, we may have the trees and shrubs watering 2 or 3 days a week during the summertime, one start time a day. We'd have the grass watering 6 days a week, 3 start times a day for its own schedule. And then finally for the annual, if you have an annual flower bed, you may water anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week on its own schedule. So obviously, if you have a property that doesn't have the ability to separate the watering schedules, obviously the savings won't occur. So if you're watering your grass and everything, you still have a little bit of grass and you're watering your shrubs and trees on that that same sort of grass schedule, one of two things will happen. You may see some savings because it's a drip system, but obviously those trees, shrubs are not going to be able to survive on the small amount of minutes that that grass is going to be watering. So there may be, plant death. Next slide. So again, as I said, really what you want to look at is you want to make sure this is obviously the key to saving water. If the customer or the contractor is not scheduling correctly, you're not going to see the savings, or you're going to see savings, but you're going to see plant death. So the amount of money it costs to do a landscape transformation or conversion, you want to be able to make sure you have the clock that's able to irrigate the landscape you have properly. So obviously you want to know when you should irrigate. Watering, obviously don't want to water in the middle of the day. The start times, how many valves, how long you're going to water. Obviously you want to be able to have multiple programs. That is key, unless you have one, as an example, a complete xeric landscape for the front and backyard, then I guess it wouldn't matter. But if you have different watering requirements for the property, you want to make sure you have multiple programs. And then by a clock, if you plan on adding zones in the future, obviously you want to purchase a clock that allows you the ability to do that. Next slide. So finally, really, obviously, WaterSense has a bunch of smart irrigation controllers that they've tested, and I highly recommend them. One thing, it's able to, a lot of these controllers now are able to accurately get the current climate data from where your property is. So it gives you the ability to set the watering schedule for your current, microclimate almost to your property. Really, there is a little initial program that you have to do with the clock to be able to say, okay, it's sandy soil or it's loam soil. I have this type of drip system, or I have this low, medium, or high water use plants. You may need to get some additional information from the local water purveyor. But the key is the one thing I do love about these controllers, it does have the ability to be able to remotely look at your property. So you can utilize your phone and turn on the irrigation system, see if something's broke. We always recommend people, looking at their yard once a month, making sure everything's working, walk around. Obviously, most of the time, I believe it goes through one ear and out the other, because nobody wants to go to their garage, turn the station on manually, go to their backyard, see what's going on, so on and so forth. But that's the key with these controllers. You have the ability to utilize your phone, turn it on manually, and be able to walk around your property just with the phone in the palm of your hand. And then finally, the rebate potential. Obviously, for SNWA, we have a coupon program that gives up to $100 for these smart controllers. Next slide. Yeah, so that's it for me. So the key is, again, if for customers out there, or landscapers, agency, the key for anything is plan, and make sure the property owners, customers plan before the conversion started. So then you can realize the savings that we see here throughout Southern Nevada. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. And I know we are a hair over time, so I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll for all of you, just so those of you who need credit can get it. And if you have any additional questions, go ahead and type them in the question box. As long as Kent and Sean don't mind sticking around, we can stay on. But those of you who need to leave, obviously, we want to respect your time. And I know Kent has been answering questions in the chat box as well. So if you have a chance, you can go ahead and take a peek at those answered questions. And again, this poll is just to make a note for us if you need, credit for your attendance. All right. And I think that might be our last poll. I'm not sure if we have another one. If we have another one, we can launch it. If not, we can go ahead and look at some questions again, pending if Sean and Kent are still up for it, sticking around. Oh, we do have another poll. And it's just a question asking what types of landscapes you all work with, whether you work with residential, commercial, or both. This helps us, again, gear our discussions here on the webinar series. All right. All right, it looks like most of the questions are more on the comment side, and I see Kent is going away and taking answers to specific questions. So I'll go ahead, wrapping up this webinar. Again, like to thank you all for joining, and I would just like to take a moment to remind everyone what WaterSense does. And some of you may already be WaterSense partners, but we might be new to some of the others who are logging in. So I just want to say that our program is a voluntary partnership program, and we really depend on our partners to carry the message of water efficiency to businesses and consumers. Many utility and government organizations on the call today definitely fall into our promotional partner category, but we have several other partner types, including manufacturers, retailers, distributors, builders, certification providers, and professional certifying organizations. And that being said, I definitely want to encourage you all to become a WaterSense partner or check out our site. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. Being a WaterSense partner is free, and with a partnership, you gain access to tons of outreach materials to help communicate the importance of water efficiency and promote WaterSense labeled products. And yeah, I don't have the question box open at the moment. If there's anything that anyone wants to pipe in and answer, here's your chance. But if not, I would like to, again, thank you for giving us your time. I know, again, we are a little over, so thank you for sticking around. And be sure to check out WaterSense and AWE, which is the Alliance for Water Efficiency, for more water saving resources. And you can find our socials on your screen there. All right, Katie, if you're good, it looks like we can go ahead and end the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.